looks a bit formidable. Part of this is because there's trouble on the motorway, and certainly Michelle is held up at junction 33, is it, Sally? So Michelle will be arriving late. But you're very welcome to this October meeting of the Public Accountability Board, which brings together, in a sense, both the September meeting and the October meeting, because the September meeting fell during the period of mourning for the late Queen. So we brought some reports together. So there will be a slight sense of datedness, possibly, with some of the reports, but that's the way it is. So it's 2 for the price of 1, or buy 1 get 1 free, I think, this morning. Welcome. So if I begin with, well, I've done the welcome. Apologies. Are there any apologies, Sally?
Mr. Hartler, I think that's it from SCT. Everybody else is present and correct today. And Alison Fletcher, apologies from Alison. I've just seen it. So everybody else, I think, is present and correct today.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got the 2 chairs of the Independent Ethics Panel, and Steve Ragg and Michael Lewis, that is, and Steve Ragg from the Joint Independent Audit Committee. So you're welcome as well. I'm on to item 2, which is just to say we are being filmed, and that will be put up on our website in due course. Thirdly, announcements. I'm not aware of any, unless you have any, Lauren. No. Item 4, no public questions. Item 5, no urgent items, unless you've got urgent items. Okay. And item 6, I don't think there are any matters that we need to exclude anyone from. Item 7, are there any declarations of interest that we don't know about and we ought to know about? Okay. Item 8, minutes of the PAB, Public Accountability Board, held on the 11th of August. Gosh, that seems a long time ago. Pages 5 to 14. Anyone want to argue, amend, quarrel with any of that? Okay, shall we take those as accepted? We're on to forced performance then, and this is item 10 on the agenda, and it's the, as you know, we do the districts in turn. We have 2 therefore this month, one held over from last month, which is Sheffield, and then Doncaster following that. So if we look at the Sheffield district report first of all, Shelley is not here, but Ben Kemp is here. So Ben, what we do is, well, you'll be familiar with it because you've been before, but we don't ask you to go through the report. That would probably take us to the rest of the day. But I pick out 1 or 2 things that have occurred to me, ask questions about that. And then if there's anything that you have a burning desire to talk about that we haven't talked about, we ask you to do at the end, if that's okay. So I'm looking at, this is pages 15 onwards in the agenda pack, 15 to 34. Yes, I should say in general to district commanders that although sometimes we ask that particular things are covered in reports, we hope that people aren't slavishly bound by that, and if there are things that they want to say, they will say them, and they don't feel that we're somehow dictating the report. That isn't the intention at all, but I am grateful when the things that we reference are mentioned. The Lord Mayor of Sheffield took me aside the other day. Ben, this is not in your report, but you might have a comment on it. She was really concerned about, she's a councillor for the Manor district, Manor Arbourthorne, I think, Manor Castle, and she was very concerned about drugs in the amphitheatre behind the station up there and antisocial behaviour, and I wonder if you could just say something around that. She was anxious to know that you're aware of it, which I'm sure you are, and that you're on the job. So.
Yeah, so that is an area where we have seen spikes in antisocial behaviour. We have been working really closely with our partners in tackling some of those issues. We have got some barriers within that area. So one of the barriers is around reporting. Often reports are made quite some time after the actual incidents have occurred, and that hinders our ability to respond effectively. What we have done about that is we've engaged with the local community through door knocks, through leaflet drops and other activity, and set up a bit of a WhatsApp group to try and encourage reporting expediently. We did an operation there a week and a half ago, where one Saturday night we put a dedicated team of neighbourhood officers who went out and proactively patrolled in that area. That resulted in a number of stop searches, a number of people who were, because predominantly the vehicle centre, the antisocial behaviour is around vehicle use in that area, so people drive there. So we did a lot of targeted activity around people driving into that. We have worked with the local authorities and the partners to try and pedestrianise some of that area. We are concerned that the layout is not as efficient as it could be, so we are working in terms of designing out crime. And we do have some CCTV, so we are working with the local authority around a CCTV camera. Its static position is on that area now, which it wasn't previously, and that feeds into the council's live CCTV monitoring. So there's quite a bit of work gone on there, and it is something that we'll continue to target in that community.
Thank you very much indeed for that. So it's not necessarily local people then, that they're coming in from elsewhere?
That's what we believe. It's a really nice view of the city, so
yes.
It's a natural, with being an amphitheatre, there's natural seating, it's a good place for people to congregate, so we get people travelling from various areas within Sheffield and slightly beyond to come and sit there, and the reports are that people are taking drugs in that locality, drinking, etc., and hence our operation to tackle that.
Okay, thanks very much. If we turn to page 16 in the report, this is at the top of the page. And really to say thank you very much for tram lines. It seemed to go off very well, few arrests and not much by way of incident, and it just seemed a very positive report. I don't know whether you want to add to that or...
Yeah, I think it would be remiss of me to take any credit for that, because because the Chief Inspector Ferguson was the silver commander for that, and Chief Inspector Bradley, and they put a lot of time into working with the event organisers around the layout of the site to make sure that it was conducive to a happy and safe festival, and the policing operation was largely down to them, supported by local officers both within the city centre for the after party and the various events that take place. And Sheffield City Council we work really closely with to deliver that, and obviously also the wider event in terms of the safe running of that. So yeah, it was a really successful event, and very few arrests, and very much enjoyed by all.
Very good, thank you. I'm on the same page, just under the bar charts there. Talk about increases in incident demand and in volume of emergency graded incidents. I just wonder whether you had any thoughts about why that was the case, and how you manage public expectations around this, particularly around how you need to prioritise.
So the incident demand has increased, and we have seen increases throughout the summer months, and naturally as more people go outside, the nighttime economy is busier, events happening such as tram lines and other things in the city centre, and broader across Sheffield really, we do see increases in demand as increases in people come out and about and move around, and that's one of the things that we have seen. So I'd say that was a large part of the rationale as to why.
Perhaps if I could just add to that, Commissioner, it has been a challenging summer. I think we talked at a previous pub about our summer surge plans, how we put extra officers in by use of overtime over the summer, and we're incredibly proud of the effort that our officers made to meet that increased demand. Part of the challenge has been we've recruited that many officers that are still in training. That has left our frontline response teams depleted, but that will now start to change, because those officers that we started to recruit 2 years ago are coming out of the final phase of their training into response teams, so our response numbers will continue to grow. So we've just reported to HMIC, in September we had about 650 officers across the force, engaged and response team. That will rise to, I think it's 791 by March of next year, so you really start to see a difference in terms of the number of officers available to respond to emergencies and priority calls.
Yeah, that's a big number, isn't it? So, yeah.
I think it's also worth saying that the rise in demand isn't just isolated to Sheffield or indeed South Yorkshire. It's been a national issue over the summer months, and certainly the 999 service over the summer saw some record-breaking demand in relation to the highest recorded ever number of calls to the emergency services on sort of certain days, helped by a heat wave, I'm sure, on some days.
Is that what it's all about, or not?
Well, seasonally, we always see increases in demand over the summer. You know, people are off school, they're off work, there's greater sort of movement out in our communities. This summer, of course, we had the dreadful fires, which created additional demand as well. So I think there's a layer of really complex things at play, but certainly the seasonality plays a key part in this. And demand in the last couple of years has been artificially suppressed, really, because of some of the COVID restrictions that were in place.
Do we all go doolally in the summer then, is that? you don't
I'm
have
not
to,
sure that's quite the term that I would use.
it's not a police term, and you don't have to answer it, but okay. There was something, Ben, there was a letter in the Star today, which you might care to look at, a chap called Peter Gill, who says he's deeply troubled by Carver Street and what's happening on Carver Street. And he talks about stabbings and muggings. Now, I wasn't aware that there was a sudden increase in issues around Carver Street. And in fact, I thought that had calmed quite a bit of late. I just wonder whether you had a comment on that.
So Carver Street is a key part of our nighttime economy plan.
Yes.
It's a really busy place where there's lots of bars and people generally congregate, and where people are, crime necessarily follows. In terms of, we have a really comprehensive nighttime economy plan within the city centre. So we have over 50 officers that are deployed in the city centre on a Friday and Saturday evening that are dedicated to policing the city centre on public order patrols. We also have a dedicated problem-solving plan around robbery. We've actually seen reductions in robbery as a district in Sheffield, so robbery's on a downward trend, and I think we cover later on in the pack around some of the performance around that. But we do really target those sort of, and we've had some really good successes with effective arrests and things like that. Notwithstanding, unfortunately robbery does occur in the city centre. We are acutely aware of that and have some robust plans in place to tackle it.
Thank you.
And it's also worth noting, Commissioner, that we've invested more resources into the city centre neighbourhood policing team, who own that plan now. And I've been out personally on a Friday night and watched the plan in operation, and it is a robust plan. And if you're out in the nighttime economy, particularly on weekend evenings, you will see significant visible policing presence.
Yes, I am quite often in that part of the city centre and do often see officers, but it just seemed odd to me that he should highlight Carver Street particularly, but anyway, okay. Page 17, if we could go to that. This is, well, really follows on. Having had the summer surge, we're approaching dark nights now, and I wondered if you could say something around that. What are the plans to manage dark nights? Do we see that as any different from normal, or is it business as usual for dark nights?
The Darker Nights plans is very much not business as usual, and it's business as usual in terms of we always have a plan for that time of year.
Yes.
But it differs from daily business as usual. What we have a dedicated plan for each of the different neighbourhood policing team areas. Each of the communities has been sort of RAG rated, where we assess where we're likely to see spikes in demand. We've worked with our partners, both at the football clubs in Sheffield and other partners internally and externally, to put on diversionary activity for young people, and there's a lot of work ongoing already to get upstream of that. So we'll have a suite of diversionary activities that will deter young people from engaging in antisocial behaviour over the dark nights period. That started on the 18th of October. Does that plan comes into effect, but we've already started the media and marketing work around that, and that'll run right through the Darker Nights period. Each of the neighbourhood policing teams has staffing already identified, dedicated and warned for key period dates and days of targeted activity around young people, and also, for example, around fireworks shops and other things like that we'll be looking to work with our partners to ensure we've got appropriate governance enforcement around some of those sort of facilitators to some of the antisocial behaviour that we see. So I'm really confident we have a really robust and comprehensive plan with our partners across Sheffield to deal with Darker Nights.
Thank you. It was a slight continuation of some of the themes we've already developed on page 18 at the bottom. And this is, again, city centre nighttime economy, but at the bottom there you mention working with partners to develop a new nighttime economy plan inclusive of safe space hubs, and you mentioned containers on Fargate. Now, I think a lot of people quite wonder what. I think a lot of people think containers have been left there by accident, but they are deliberate. Could you explain the containers and how they relate to your work?
So the containers are a Sheffield City Council initiative that's a commercial entity consisting of restaurants, bars, and is part of the grant of 28 million that's been awarded Sheffield City Council to regenerate Fargate and the street in that area. In terms of our role within those containers, there was an initial plan to have a safe space within there, so that would be staffed by health agencies, by street pastors and other people who were stakeholders in the nighttime economy, and it would represent a space where vulnerable people within the nighttime economy, either through alcohol or through vulnerability to other offences, could be taken, safeguarded, receive support and some minor medical assistance. Unfortunately, since this report, the City Council has had to shelve those plans temporarily. They've not cancelled them completely, but that as a safe space will be coming into fruition, and I've got a meeting about that in the next month to look at how we effectively resource that with health partners. In terms of the containers as a commercial entity, I believe they go live later on this month, and we're currently when Fargate redevelopment goes, we're currently in negotiation with the council around where they're going to be redeployed at a suitable location that's safe and that we'd be really supportive of.
So those two at the end of Fargate, they don't stay there then, or they do? They do stay there.
So in the short term, they'll be staying there, and then the longer term plan for the council is as Fargate gets redeveloped, then those containers will be relocated to an alternative area of the city, and we're currently working with the City Council to identify a space that would be suitable, appropriate, that we'd be supportive of. Obviously it's a local council decision, it's not a policing decision.
Okay, because they're big things, aren't they?
They are.
So perhaps this is not a question for you, I can say, why move them? Why not go to the place you want them to finish up in? But
So I've been on a walk around of the city centre with Richard Eyre, who's the city centre director from Sheffield City Council, and I think it's part of a longer term council strategy to redevelop Fargate, to have a number of outside eateries, bars and residential accommodation in that area. So the central area of Fargate will be redeveloped, and I think work starts next month to put a load of benches and other seating activity there, which is obviously they'll be it's quite prohibitive to put the seating in with the big containers there, so they'll be relocated.
Over the years, Fargate's changed enormously. I can remember the time when, Michael may remember this as well, when Fargate, the rents on Fargate were some of the highest in Europe for retail, but it's clearly not there now. But
you could have a bath in the fountain on your way home.
That would be in the summer months.
just in light nights.
Thank you. That's page 18. If we look across to page 19, this is the second para down. You mentioned stop and search, and the IEP may prick up their ears at this point. We continue to make effective use of stop and search within the nighttime economy with a 62% positive outcome. When I saw that, I nearly fell off my seat. We're used to 20% positive outcomes, but 62%. Have you slipped in the wrong figure, or is this true?
It's an accurate figure, Commissioner. It's
yes.
I think it's a testament to the effective briefings that take place in the nighttime economy. It's supplemented by the use of Operation Sidewinder, which is the deployment of a passive drugs dog in the city centre, which gives us an indication that someone may be in possession of a controlled substance, which forms part of our decision making around grounds for a search. So it is something that, you know, we do target drugs in the nighttime economy. We know that drug supply can fuel serious violent crime in the city centre. We know that it can fuel disorder later on in the evening and other events like that. So we're really proactive around targeting that as part of our proactive policing of the nighttime economy in Sheffield.
But that is a very good outcome, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very good set of results, thank you. And at the bottom of the page you talk about public engagement and the brew with the bobby and so on. I presume these are neighbourhood police. You're not taking police from anywhere else. It's
100%. So these are neighbourhood officers and PCSOs that are working within the communities that they police, that are providing a visible engagement station where members of the public can come in, talk about local priorities, be updated on what's happening. What we found with our engagement strategy is that one-size-fits-all approach is not very effective for us. So in some areas, the brew with a bobby in a cafe, we've tried and it's not worked. We've not had the right engagement, and they prefer pop-up police stations or perhaps engagement in other partner facilities. In some of our communities, a brew with a bobby is incredibly effective, and we get really good response rates, and the sergeants monitor the effectiveness of those engagement in terms of how many people turn up, what sort of questions are being asked, and then we can tailor that engagement strategy bespoke to each local community.
that's very good. So numbers turning up would be one measure, and quality of conversation is another then.
Most definitely, and taking of leaflets and things like that, because some
Yes.
people don't want to engage, they just pick things up. So we have a range of measures to monitor its effectiveness, and equally, I mean, the ultimate measure is, are we doing things that are a priority for that local community, because that's
Sure.
the real crux.
And over the page on page 20, second para down, interactive patrols. That sounds good. I don't know whether you could say a word about that. But
Yeah, so we have interactive patrols, which are the officers will post their patrol route broadly and rough times that they're going to be in specific areas from the neighbourhood policing teams. They'll post phone numbers of those officers, and members of the public can contact the officer and say, "Oh, can you please call and see me? I'm at this shop, or I'm going to be in this location." So, and we get some really good engagement. So people ring up and want to meet the officer in a suitable place on their patrol, and it also reassures the public that we're patrolling in the correct areas, you know, per their needs and wants.
So you're pleased with that? You think that works? And
Most definitely, yeah. We get some really positive engagement, and particularly in the Parsons Cross area, it's a really positive thing, and we get some really nice feedback from the community.
is this done in Doncaster? Do you do it elsewhere?
We do have apps that show where our staff are patrolling. We make use of sort of GPS devices that our neighbourhood teams have got that track where they are, so we can share with the public where we patrol. In some areas that's easier than others, purely because of the geography of the district and the number of officers that we have on our neighbourhood teams. But some of the plans that Sheffield have implemented will inevitably be easier for Doncaster as our numbers increase. And we start to push more people into our neighbourhood teams from this autumn onwards.
Sure. Thanks. I'm on to page 24 now, and this is 3.3.4, domestic abuse pilot. The district still plans to pilot a DA problem-solving team. I wonder if you could say something about that and the timescales here.
Yeah, so the domestic abuse problem-solving team pilot was approved by the command team, so the funding's now in place for that. We've recruited someone into that role as a sergeant and coordinator. So that role, that work will be starting next week or the week after. And that's a bit of an innovative approach to tackling some of our domestic abuse that perhaps is not picked up within some of the other existing meetings, or where there's significant volumes of repeat, and really focusing down on the problem solving and early intervention, effective support, and coordinating some of that activity with our partners to try and reduce rates of reoffending and safeguard vulnerable people.
So the problem is reoffending. That's
both in terms of reoffending by perpetrators and obviously victims being repeat victims, so on both sides of the...
Okay. And just a little bit below that, safeguarding CSC, CCE, Protecting Vulnerable People, Resourcing. And you write there, Sheffield PVP, investigation teams continue to average higher workloads than across the wider force. That sounds alarming, and I just, again, wonder if you could say a word there.
Yeah, so the current position around PVP is we have had some resources challenges, as Mr Forber alluded to previously. We're coming out towards the other side of that now, where we've got we're starting to see increases in specially trained detectives, and we have a really robust plan in place to deliver effectively trained staff to be able to deal with those workloads. So they are higher than average. We understand the reason for that, and we have a robust plan in place to address that with the training of new officers, with the filling of some of those vacancies that we've currently got as the student officers come through and start to be able to allow us to release officers from the front line into secondary investigation roles. So I appreciate, you know, we do have higher than average workloads, but I can reassure you there is a plan in place, and that position is improving.
Okay. I'm on to page 26. I'm sorry this is a bit jumping about, but it's the time factor that squeezes a bit. But at the top there you talk about, this is 3.4.3, Make Safe. The CSE team have recently been involved in a training input with the council licensing team to taxi drivers around signs of child exploitation, etc. Are there still hotels in Sheffield which take immigrant or refugee children, migrant children? Does that still go on?
So yes, there are sites across Sheffield where refugees will be housed either from various conflicts or for a variety of reasons.
And they're not. Are they called hotels? Are there hotels in the?
So there's different types of residential accommodation. So there's the description of them is subjective, but some are housed in what would be commercially a hotel, and others are housed in different types of property, maybe converted former pubs that have been turned into houses of multiple occupancy, and things like that. So the vernacular around it's not necessarily limited to hotels.
But you know where they are?
Yes.
Where they all are?
Yes.
And Make Safe is included in that?
So Make Safe's an operation that's
Yes.
targeted at hotels where perpetrators may seek to take vulnerable children to exploit them through various offending, and it's about educating staff that work within those environments to spot the signs at the booking in process, working with taxi drivers to spot the signs of exploitation, so where something doesn't feel right, for example an adult male gets in a taxi with a young female, to be inquisitive around that and observe, look for other signs and report any concerns they've got around that, so that we can follow up on that. We do what I've described as test purchasing operations, where we go and test this out. So we deploy plainclothes officers, maybe some of our cadets and other young people that would work with our officers to go and test the effectiveness of our training and which hotels have implemented that effectively and which haven't. Where it hasn't been effective, we'll work with that hotel to put in place action plans and deliver further training to really reduce the risk. So this operation's really about protecting vulnerable people in hotels, taxis and other locations.
Yeah. So it would or it wouldn't include those places where those refugee children are housed?
If they're in a hotel, it would include them, and if they're not within a hotel and setting, then it wouldn't include them.
Is that an area of risk? Or?
I'm not really sure what the challenge is, because most where the refugees are housed, it's more as permanent accommodation for them, whereas Make Safe is really around people making one-night bookings for maybe 2 male adults and a girl, and that's the kind of target for that. I think that the challenge around what do we need to do
so it's a different
to
issue,
protect
really.
refugee children might be a slightly different issue.
Okay. Right, thank you. Just coming down the page a little bit, tackling crime and ASB, neighbourhood crime team, this is 3.5.1. You talk about a neighbourhood crime investigation team is now in place. Is this new?
So
have we heard about these before?
So the neighbourhood crime investigation team's been in place for the last quarter. And it's a dedicated team of officers comprising of specialist detectives and police constables working together to tackle specifically robbery and burglary, and then any other series of offences that we see, for example, in vehicle crime or other crime types which really do harm our community, and a broadly titled neighbourhood crime.
So they've been pulled together from what, neighbourhood teams? Or-
So the neighbourhood teams have remained static in terms of volumes, side the growth that we've had in the city centre, which is uplift. The resources have been pulled together mainly from the crime portfolio, so we had a separate robbery team and a separate burglary team within Sheffield. They've been amalgamated to provide increased coverage, so we now have a broader range of coverage on early and late shifts and on a weekend, and they've got a shared focus around both of those issues.
Okay, thank you. On page 27, residential burglary, can I ask you the obvious question? Do you visit every house that's burgled?
In the main, yes. So there are always exceptions to the rule around the availability of people's own wishes. But our target in Sheffield is to visit the victim of every burglary.
And in the main, to
We
use
do
your
achieve
word,
that,
you
yes.
do.
Yeah.
What does in the main mean? Is that 90%,
Our
80%?
force policy has been for a significant period of time that all residential dwellings that are burgled are offered a home visit, and where that doesn't take place, that's generally due to the wishes of the occupant. It may be that they've been on holiday, they've come home, they've found it, the forensic evidence is done, but our force position is, and has been for some time, that all residential burglaries are visited.
And now that's the national.
It is
All
the national.
police chiefs are saying the same thing.
It was only new for a very small number of forces. It's been in place like that for the vast majority of forces for some time.
Why is that highlighted then in national newspapers by government ministers?
I suspect because it wasn't the position of the Metropolitan Police until quite recently.
Okay, right. Okay, page 28. Theft from motor vehicles, and you say in the second para under that, theft from motor vehicles, outcomes in this crime type remain low, and as such crime prevention is key to the success of some. Why is it so difficult, the outcomes here? Why do you struggle with this one?
So I think that the theft from motor vehicles is a challenge for us to investigate because the criminals are often opportunistic. There's often limited forensic yield from those, so we've done various inputs to officers and training to our frontline practitioners around our ability to identify forensic opportunities and exploit those to catch offenders. Intelligence yield around this is low because of the opportunistic nature of the offenders. I mean, some of the offences we've had are the people stealing 23p from the centre console of a car that's been left insecure and things like that, and it leaves us with a real challenge to investigate and identify those offenders. We have adopted more of a problem-solving approach, so making the areas in which these offenders operate really, really difficult. So things such as putting up effective street signage, working with our partners around CCTV, doing a vulnerable vehicle scheme where we identify vehicles with valuables on display and provide information to the occupants and owners around that. And we have seen some real success from that. So, for example, in the Manor and Arborthorne ward, we've seen a 68% reduction in theft from vehicles. In the Sharrow ward, we've seen a 60% reduction. Around the Northern General, which was one of our hotspots, we've halved theft from vehicles, and that's down to a combination of us being proactive and patrolling those areas at the right time, through some changes in our crime recording, not in terms of recording as our call logging, so we're identifying more specifically where some of these offences are occurring, which allows us to really effectively problem solve and target harden. And as I say, even in the city centre it's down by 43%, which is really positive, so we are making some headway into this, but detections do remain a challenge for us, Commissioner.
Yeah. Well, they're quite impressive figures, what you just quoted there. That's good, thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question, Commissioner?
Of course.
Ben or Tim, really, just in terms of the solvability, the outcomes, to what extent are the police being deluged by sort of CCTV, smart doorbells, that sort of evidence, to be able to crunch through some of that evidence? Because I would imagine you're getting that submitted by members of the public who are trying to help their own crime being solved, etc.
Yeah, so it's to be honest, there isn't a consistent answer to that because it's very patchy depending on the areas. We've undertaken some a pilot problem-solving approach in partner with an academic university over 12 streets where we've actually installed Ring doorbells and we've distributed those at strategic locations around that locality to identify what impact that has on crime, whether that deters crime, whether it increases our opportunities to detect crime in that area, and that's due to report probably in the next 3 to 6 months. Obviously, we're not beholden to the timescales around that in the main, but so we do see that. The force has invested quite heavily in digital technology, as you'll no doubt be aware through previous reporting, and we now have a new database that's just been launched in Sheffield where the public can upload CCTV proactively themselves. That's a real efficiency for us in terms of the public load that proactively. Officers don't have to go out to the scene, so it gives us some efficiency around collecting that CCTV, and it also allows us a degree of corporate memory. So where a crime occurs, we can log on and identify CCTV opportunities from the office, if you like, so we know and can go target that engagement and collection of CCTV. But we do utilise CCTV heavily in our investigations. We do make appeals to the public through media, Facebook, social media channels, etc. So it does remain a key line of inquiry for us.
And in terms of managing that increased level of digital CCTV, that's why we've invested in NICE Investigative Digital Asset Management System, which is now rolling out across the force. So that means that, you know, for instance, if you have CCTV at home, rather than having to send an officer out to go and collect that CCTV and often bring it back on hard media, I can send you a link via email. You can upload it to that link, and this is immediately then available within our crime investigation system, and we can fire it all around the force for people to use, you know, in a far more efficient way than we've been able to previously. We've got the ability to be able to crop it very easily to the right bits and send it to the CPS. So
it's manageable.
It will be a
basically.
game changer, that, in terms of the way that we manage digital evidence in the future.
That's good.
Thank
you. On to page 31, OCG's modern slavery. I would wonder whether you had any sense of the number of young people and children who are travelling out of our area or being taken out of our area.
So we have a mapping process within the region where we identify those drug lines where we believe drugs are being exported across boundaries, both internally within the force area and externally within the Sheffield or South Yorkshire, externally out of there. So we do have a number of those lines that exist. And within there, unfortunately, as we'll be aware through various reporting and information that we've got, young people are used as a commodity to transport those drugs for a variety of reasons. We do have a new team that we've established in Sheffield, which is specifically looking at this as an issue. So we've developed a new methodology to investigate drug trafficking offences, and I won't go into due to various operational sensitivities around it. However, that approach will give us a greater oversight and understanding and allow us to effectively target those where young people are being exploited.
Thank you. I think I'll stop there. I mean, there are many more questions I could ask, obviously, on such a full report. I wondered whether there was anything there that you wanted to draw attention to.
I think what I would like to highlight is that within Sheffield and no doubt within the wider force, we've got a real focus around problem solving and tackling some of these issues with our partners, working together through a problem solving approach, and we've got a number of problem solving plans that have been implemented that are really starting to deliver, and we've seen 8% reductions in neighbourhood crime and across the board in Sheffield, and it's a really positive picture. So I think it's just worth highlighting that. I appreciate there's a lot of text within here and a lot of detail within the report, but we are making a positive difference in reducing some of this crime through effective problem solving.
Thank you. No, don't apologise for the details, because we have read the reports, even though our questions are only we jump from one thing to another a bit. But thank you very much indeed for that. I don't know whether senior commanders want to add.
I think it's really comprehensive. Thank you. And just in relation to the problem solving piece, that's clearly something we are continuing to develop across the force. And next week I'll be hosting the National Problem Solving Conference in Burton-on-Trent. And South Yorkshire Police have won one of the Antilles Award categories. and are in the running for the final overall award as well. So we'll keep you updated after that.
Very good indeed. Well, thanks very much indeed. That was, if I dare say so, confidently and competently done, and we're very pleased. So thank you. Thank you. You're going to swap places with Lydia. Okay. Thanks. Right. So if we turn to the second of our district reports, which is item 11, the Doncaster district, Ian, and we'll do the same if we may just come to some questions and see. Got a good set of answers there. You've got to sort of match here, and it's a high bar. It's a high bar today. I'm on page 37. First of all, then, if I can, and this is on section 1.8, and talks about current vacancies in response and neighbourhood teams remain a factor in meeting demand. However, from 26 September, the district will see the first cohort of trainee officers fully signed up. We've partly touched on that. Just for the benefit of those people who do listen into this and look up our web from time to time, our website and the broadcast there. Could you say something about, fully signed off? Because I think a lot of people assume that once we've got the officers in the force, that's it. They're out on the streets, and of course that isn't the case.
No, it's not the case. So the previous training programmes that we ran had nationally had officers sort of learn more on the job. Now, because of the complexities of policing and sort of increased public expectation, I think that the training programme's quite rightly changed. Lots of our student officers spend much of their time at Sheffield University through that PEQF programme, and they come into the police service to do rotations where they spend time in response, neighbourhoods or investigations. So it is a sliding scale of competency as they go through their first few years. They do spend time in the districts, they spend time with tutor constables and working on the shifts, learning the job, applying the knowledge that they've learned elsewhere. The 2-year period is a real milestone for us because it means they're allocated permanently to the district. They're then fully deployable. We don't then lose that capacity when they go back to the training school and top up their knowledge. So, I mean, I think within that section you've highlighted, I think despite some of those challenges that the training programme has brought us over the last 2 years, we're at a real point now this autumn where we will start to see the numbers increase, as the Deputy Chief Constable mentioned a few minutes ago. So I think even though we've had that difficulty at our district, we've seen an increase in demand. We've obviously discussed that in Sheffield, absolutely the same in Doncaster. We have a 6% increase in demand over the last quarter alone. When you look at the last 12 months versus the previous 12 months, our demands in Doncaster, the force, the region and the country have increased. But we are still tracking around our emergency calls in the same place that we were. We have, if you note at 1.3 at the top of page 37, actually the average number of active and unallocated incidents has fallen this August versus the previous August, which I think is an indication of how hard our staff are working.
Could you explain what that means, active and unallocated?
So these are calls for service that go through the force control room. They're obviously recorded on the system and are then allocated to available resources to go and attend them, whether that they might be siphoned off for a neighbourhood team to go and deal with it because it's more of a community-based issue that's longer term that can resolve. Obviously includes emergency incidents which we attend within the 15-minute guidelines or marked as a priority. So historically we've had large volumes that we haven't been able to resource not immediately but resource within our normal time frames. So that average is falling.
So what does unallocated mean then?
That there's a resource that's not yet available to go and deal with.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And I suppose what to put some context around it, you have your response teams that are there and respond to the radio, but our demand isn't linear. It peaks and troughs different times of the day. We obviously have shift patterns that provide overlaps with larger numbers of staff to deal with those peak times of demand. But we're still dealing with, obviously, with public calls for services. You can't map this out entirely accurately, so you're always going to get periods of time where you get more calls than you have officers immediately available every minute of the day. And we obviously have processes to then risk assess those, make sure that they're still dealt with by different officers.
Can I take you then to 1.9 at the bottom of that page? You talk about response times.
Yeah.
Response times for priorities also remain stable in between June and August, average 1 hour and 15 minutes. If I remember the Sheffield report, they were talking about that being 1 hour.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a difference.
There is.
There's a difference there. What does that tell us about?
It tells us a lot about the geography of Doncaster. Sheffield clearly has a larger population, but proportionally has a different number of police officers to match that. We have a smaller population in Doncaster, but we're over 200 square miles. It's the largest metropolitan borough in the country in terms of geography. So some of the response times are affected by the drive, and really the sort of the roads network that we have to negotiate. If you look up in sort of the Asken area up near Thorn, it's very, very rural. We do have processes where we try to place resources in those areas to respond to demand as it comes up. That's not always possible. The nature of policing means that those staff can't necessarily park up in a visibility area and respond to a call that may or may not come in during that particular time frame. We try and achieve that, but naturally with other vulnerability and risk that it's not something you can sustain long term. So I think considering the vacancy factor that the police service nationally has seen, considering the geography that we particularly have in Doncaster, I think if we're sort of 15 minutes behind Sheffield in terms of our average response to a priority call, I actually think that's not too bad.
Yeah.
Clearly, we intend to improve that. Clearly, with increasing numbers, we would hope to see that improve into the next calendar year and next financial year.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. I'm on to page 39 now, which is the section headed workforce, and you talk about culture. I was pleased to see this in there, to see a focus on the culture of the force, because I know that's something you are looking at, you're trying to address, and I know Michael Lewis and the IEP are interested in this as well. You talk there in the first sentence, more or less, recently the Doncaster Command Team, along with every sergeant and inspector, participated in a culture and leadership workshop and a series of leadership away days. I wonder what you'd found as a result of doing that, and just some comment around that, I think.
Okay, so you'll be aware, Commissioner, that the force has a values framework around fairness, integrity, and trust. The way that our internal culture manifests itself, and the behaviours that our staff display internally is significant, because it ends up being carried forward to the way that we deal with the public. I think through the workshops that we've run, we have well motivated people, and we have a workforce that, as you'll be aware, is increasingly new. We have got lots and lots of new people coming into the organisation. It's important that we set the right culture within the workforce that is about sort of that delivering a service to the public, putting victims first, and that can only be delivered, and we can only learn that culture through good leadership. So the most important line within our organisation is actually our sergeants, who interact with our constables and our police staff throughout their duties, and that's where our staff learn their behaviours. You know, someone like me, I try and see as many people as I can across the borough, but it's big. We have lots of stations, we have lots of staff working different shifts. So it's our sergeants that we really need to drive a positive culture One that is a growth mindset where we embrace the challenge that we face and we put the public at the forefront of everything that we do. We strive to, go back to the response times, we strive to improve that. If we tell the public that we aim to be there within an hour if it's a priority, then we really should do everything we can to try and get there within that hour. So I think that's been a really useful piece of work that we've started. It's not a one-hit wonder. This is obviously something that we look to embed over the months and years to come. We've actually got some leadership away days coming up at the end of this month and into the start of next month, where again we'll revisit some of those issues around culture. We'll revisit some of the commitments that we've all made as supervisors, how we will conduct ourselves, how we will lead our teams. We'll have a bit of a sense check around those. We'll also wrap that up with some elements of well-being that's important as well for our staff in an increasingly busy environment, is that we need to look after our people so that they can look after the public.
Is your own going to meet the sergeants? Is that part of this, or is this separate?
It's not a structured part of the same series of events, but it is a part of our sort of force
complements.
Programme,
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm over the page on page 40, 2.6, and you referenced. We're getting better at acronyms, but one's got in here, CAPE.
Okay.
And I don't know what CAPE is. I'm sure the public don't know what CAPE is.
No, sorry, they won't do. Sorry. In essence, it's our old tutor unit. It is the dedicated team of officers that help develop our staff when they're not in the educational setting and they're in the work environment. It's our practice educators. They assess the work that our staff do. They ensure that they're meeting the competencies that need to be signed off as fully operational.
Does it stand for something then? CAPE.
It does, and I'm embarrassed to say I can no longer remember.
That's all right. So
it's assessment practice educators.
So we don't even know what our own.
No, well, I see why you use it. You couldn't actually explain it.
I think to put it, yes, our staff go to the university and they learn a lot of theory and sit down and learn the law. But policing at its heart is a people profession. Yeah. And you learn by doing the job and being supervised. And a huge, compared to how it was years ago, where you just learned and were signed off on a one-page sheet at the end of 2 years. There is a really, really robust accreditation system now, and competencies that student officers must assess, and they complete a very, very robust portfolio that is done under the supervision of the CAPE team and is signed off. So at the conclusion of that 2 or 3 year period, depending on whether they're a degree holder or a high level apprentice, there is an evidence base that absolutely accredits that police officer as fully competent and meeting the standard that not just we require at South Yorkshire Police, but the standards are set out by the College of Policing.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a world away from how it was perhaps 15, 20 years ago.
Well, perhaps even less than that. I don't know. Yeah. Thank you. Page 42, and this is under the domestic abuse heading, Ian, if we can do that. 3.5. Due to the 15% increase in demand, a dedicated team was established to reduce the number of outstanding suspects, etc., etc. Is that just for a short period of time, or is this an ongoing thing? So
we only parked that actually last week. So it is a team that we put in place to respond to some of those sort of seasonal increases in demand. We've seen steady increases in domestic abuse over 3 years, and I suppose it depends which way you frame or view this. I think it's encouraging that we see increasing reporting. It's obviously concerning that we continue to see domestic abuse and obviously it results in domestic abuse victims. But it is reassuring that we do have reporting throughout the summer. In particular, we've seen quite an increase, 15% over the quarter. So that leads inevitably to an increase in the number of domestic abuse offenders.
we wanted to ensure that there's obviously that churn of new incidents leads to named offenders. That means that we need to go and detain them. As the demand increased, we were concerned that we didn't want the number of outstanding suspects that we needed to locate and arrest become unmanageable. So we brought together a team of staff from the response function that brought some real focus around it. We made some big reductions over the summer period, and actually we're now back into the autumn with numbers that are back in the norm in terms of outstanding suspects. So, but it is something that we will continue to monitor. I think it shows that we can flex to particular challenges and particular peaks in demand. If we feel, as we go towards the back end of this calendar year, and we get towards the Christmas period where we sometimes see increases, if we need to put that back in place, we can do. What I don't want you to think is that we still don't have that dedicated team that deal with domestic abuse as an investigation, and the dedicated people that work around victims. This was an arrest team that helped us stay on top of
No, I understand that, yes. So the increase in demand was a summer issue. It's not the change in definition that didn't lead.
Well, that inevitably does incorporate some additional offences through it. Yes, it does. But you clearly see increases in demand through the summer, as we've already discussed earlier on in the board. So there's a combination of both. I think we're happier that the trend appears to be more consistent with the time of year now. So.
Okay. I can see you're going to have to stop all leave over the summer period, aren't you? It's the only way. Only take your holidays in the winter, which...
That would be incredibly popular.
Yes. Well, you could...
Well, it's counter to the culture programme.
Yeah.
You could all go off to Sharm el Sheikh. That's... Well, I'm going to say that's warm all... You could all go to Skegness, because whatever time of the year you go, the temperature's always the same, isn't it? So, right. Okay, right. Looking at 3.7, again, domestic abuse. You talk about a domestic abuse coordinator being appointed there. That's different than from other districts. That's something that you're doing in Doncaster. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Commissioner, I'm not fully cited if that is something that's in the districts. Right. It's something that we're working with across the partnership in Doncaster to bring about. It will allow us to enhance our sort of problem-solving approach to it. I know in the previous PAV report we talked about 6 particular problem-solving plans that we got around sort of high-risk and repeat offenders. As you would imagine, that when you work with domestic abuse perpetrators and domestic abuse victims, it needs an awful lot of time and focus to try and bring about a conclusion to that offending. And what you need to understand is what's the driver for the offending. There are often other factors, are there not, such as substance misuse or mental health can sometimes drive domestic abuse offending. So it really enhances the partnership approach we already have. We already have obviously independent domestic violence advisors that support our domestic abuse victims, and we have our dedicated investigation team that support that process through to prosecution or an alternative outcome such as a domestic violence protection order.
Yeah, I think we'd be interested to see how that goes. So perhaps the next time you do the Doncaster report, we could have
an update on that.
Something around that. So
yeah, very well.
Looking at page 43 now, and this is 3.10. This is around domestic violence protection orders. 27 breaches of DVPOs in the previous quarter, and it's now 74. I just wonder, well, whether you'd like to comment on, is that the result of proactive work? Yes. Or what? Yeah.
Yeah, DVPOs have a range of sort of restrictions, really, about, sort of instructing the offender not to molest or assault the victim, or to stay away from particular addresses, not to go within certain distance. They are a useful piece. It's a useful piece of legislation where the threshold for prosecution is unable to be met. Whether that's because a domestic abuse victim doesn't support a prosecution, doesn't want to go through that court process. We do run victims prosecutions and engage the CPS to try and prosecute, sometimes without, if the level of offending is serious enough. So these are useful because they buy a bit of space and time for a victim really to have some time away from the offender. Unfortunately, offenders don't always comply with them. And I think the risk sometimes with these orders is if we don't police them and we don't ensure that they're being adhered to, they do become worthless. So we invest quite a lot of time in not only making applications at court for them to be put in place, but we invest a lot of time in ensuring that they're complied with. As a result of which, you end up with breaches, which I think is a real strength, because we then put those offenders back in front of the courts, and we continue to support that victim after they've made their initial report to the police.
So you support DVPOs? You think they're a good thing rather than adding to your burdens, or?
It is of course a demand for us, but it's absolutely worthwhile. Because if we didn't have them and we didn't enforce them, if a victim is, understandably in many circumstances reluctant to support a criminal prosecution, they'd be left with very little to help them. So it does take a lot of time, it does take a lot of police resources, but they're absolutely a worthwhile investment in our time.
I think from a victim perspective, they are really designed to give the victim time and space away from the perpetrator, and actually that's the point at which they should get the partnership support to enable them to consider what are my options out of this, and that was one of the key elements in their design.
Okay.
And we are the highest user of DVPOs and police force in the country.
Oh. Okay.
Which is why we invested in the DVPO team in legal, specialise in getting these orders.
Interesting. Okay. Just continuing with that then, on page 44, 3.16, you say, it's the section, what are we worried about? And you say a concern is the volume of domestic abuse, repeat offenders and victims, where the prosecution is not supported by the victim. I mean, just to get some sense of how many we're talking about, or what the volume is here, or.
Yeah, I suppose it's difficult to articulate in terms of percentage rate off the hoof.
Okay.
Clearly, there are some complex factors that drive domestic abuse, and there are complex reasons why victims will not want to support prosecution. And we do find that you have victims that will contact the police and ask for immediate support and assistance when a domestic incident is occurring. And in those cases, we attend quickly, we arrest offenders. But then for a variety of reasons, victims may not wish to pursue it, will not support criminal prosecution through a court process. And as I've already sort of said, that's where a DVPO is a useful tool. We do engage the CPS around victims' prosecutions, though, and there's an example as recently as last week, for example, where our domestic abuse unit have taken a case through to the Crown Prosecution Service, who agreed that despite the victim not supporting prosecution with a witness statement, that from the officers' actions, their observations, the statements that they were able to put in about the immediate scene, the use of body-worn video that was really important, the initial disclosure from that victim who was distressed and in fear at the time of the incident, and because we'd managed to respond quickly and could see that scene, they agreed charges. The offender has already made an initial appearance and has already submitted a guilty plea at first hearing. We don't know what the sentence will be yet. I'm keen to use that particular case as a really good example for our workforce to show what we can achieve if we get to the scene of a domestic incident quickly, and we deal with and care for a victim properly, and make good use of body-worn video, for example. We can support victims without them having to have that burden almost, and that responsibility through themselves singly to rest the whole prosecution based on their account on their own.
Do many victims ask about Clare's law?
Yes, we have different categories around Clare's law. So we have the right to ask, which is where any person can request information about the risk that they may face from a current partner. So we have got some data in the report that shows that we do see sort of fairly consistent right to asks. And then there's the right to know, which is where we're a bit more, as a partnership, we're a bit more proactive, which is where the disclosure can be made by us, where we're aware of a serial domestic abuse perpetrator who has a new partner, and we proactively inform that potential victim that they may well be subject to domestic abuse. That's managed by our PVP department.
So it's not in every case. It's I mean, how do you make a decision around that?
Well, there are criteria around that. There's some quite clear criteria, and there's a risk assessment process. It's managed by sort of detective inspectors and detective chief inspectors who manage that process. So not exclusive to Doncaster, as you imagine. This is a national programme.
So, Lindsay, did you? No, you weren't.
No, just to say there is a clear framework to support decision making, which includes, as Ian's already alluded to, that risk assessment around sharing that information.
Lindsay, is this the first time you've been at PAV? I can't remember.
It is.
I should have welcomed you especially, so that was very remiss of me. I do apologise.
Rick's as well.
And Rick too. Oh my goodness.
Have you been before? This is my first time as well.
Any other declarations? Well, I'm sorry, that was bad of me. It's because we didn't do a formal round the table, which we got out of the habit of doing all these things, haven't we, since we had hybrid working. But you're all very, very welcome.
Commissioner, can I just
yes.
ask something from the Domestic Abuse Act? It's not for you, Ian, it's maybe Jackie. Just in relation to, and I should know the answer to this question, but horizon scanning. So for the Domestic Abuse Act and planning what resources might be required in the future, is that the job of BCNI, and then does it go to the Strategic Demand Board to consider in advance?
Yes, so it's not exclusively BCNI. Obviously, we also work with Tanya Pace and the team performance and governance. But yeah, it's exactly the kind of horizon scanning information that we take through the demand board initially, but also obviously will feature as part of the futures board as well. So yeah, we are. It's that kind of information that we would absolutely look at through the demand board.
And you see it in the correspondence statement?
Yes, of course.
I can take you to page 46 at the bottom, 4.4. The force is still conducting a review of its structures to improve its response to CSE, CC and county lines. So there will be a report, will there? Is that?
So that's wrapped up within the PVP review.
Do you want me to cover that?
Yeah, go on, Rick.
Okay, part of the PVP review, that's come to fruition now. Obviously, they're looking at around the structures within the PVP environment throughout. CCE and CSE forms part of that because we're conscious that Rotherham and Sheffield have specific teams in relation to it. So part of the review is how we can actually replicate that within the other two districts. So obviously that will be presented to the Tactical Change Board and then the Strategic Change Board as that comes online. But then it's around realigning the resources through the detective pipeline that's coming in through workforce planning. So ultimately we should be able to see some consistency between the districts in relation to that. So that's through the Crime Services Board earlier on this week, that was presented. So it will formally go through the Tactical Change Board to make some decisions around prioritising those resources as we move forward. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm on to page 52. It's a bit of a jump to, this is the heading drugs. 5.23, overall Doncaster has seen a 33% increase in recorded drug offences in the current group. This is a result of proactive operations to tackle drugs possession. So that sounds positive. I mean, people might get alarmed at seeing the statistic, but you'd see that as a positive.
I do see it as a positive, Commissioner, because if we don't look for drugs, we don't recover it. It gives the impression that there isn't a drug problem.
Yeah.
So I think we all understand, don't we, that drugs is a driver for lots of other issues in our communities. It creates vulnerability. It creates violence in our communities as those that supply drugs perhaps compete with each other. So I think this is something that we are really keen to sustain in Doncaster, despite the challenges that we've had around resourcing over the last 2 years. You know, certainly my view since I've been a commander at the borough is that we absolutely have to maintain some proactive capability. We cannot have a model that has neighbourhood teams, our fortified teams and our tasking teams, and then just deal with everything reactively. So you know, drugs is one example of our proactivity that we use at the borough. Our neighbourhood teams use a proactive problem-solving approach to deal with community issues in each of our areas. What we are doing at the moment as well is at the end of September we've commenced some sustained activity around drug supply, organised crime and violent crime across the borough. We've already executed over 20 search warrants. We've arrested 23 people as part of that. We've recovered approaching 1,000 cannabis plants. We have recovered Class A drugs. We've recovered amphetamine. In certain communities, amphetamine is as a drug is starting to have a bit of resurgence. And that's something that we've started a couple of weeks ago. We'll continue for the next few weeks and months. And I know in a previous PAB report we've described some of the structures that we have and the drive that we have around organised crime. You may recall that a previous report we highlighted that over 55% of our mapped organised crime members have some sort of intervention against them, whether they're in prison, whether they're on bail, whether they've got civil order against them. That, you know, I think it reflects really the commitment that we have to tackle the groups that cause this sort of harm in our community.
Thank you. If I can jump now to page 53, and then this is the last of my questions about hate crime, and OPCC officers I know have been to hate crime scrutiny panels and have noticed the large number of suspects who are under the age of 16. I don't know whether you have anything to comment around that, what we're seeing here, what you make of it.
Yeah, it is a bit of a trend that we recognise, and it's reflected then really by a bit of a drop in our incidents during the summer. We think because the schools were closed. There is there is work that we have with our neighbourhood teams who sort of lead a lot of that work around hate crime, linking up with education establishments. We've got strong links with local statutory partners, strong links with the schools to help educate our young people. You'll be aware of the work already that happens within our community safety department up at LifeWise. That's invaluable, where we bring children into that facility to talk about a range of issues. I understand that we have got other forces that have come to look at that. It doesn't happen everywhere. More locally, we have the mini police programme, which we support well in Doncaster. And I suppose just to sort of re-emphasise those strong links we have with education. Not that I particularly want to revisit it, but we had some challenges in the town centre back in sort of December and January, and around the French Gate with antisocial behaviour and issues there. The schools were really key in helping us to resolve that. We're very much open to us going into the schools, talking about standards of behaviour, what's expected of young people, and supported us communicating with parents of young people. So those sort of structures and those relationships are already in place. Gives us a really strong foundation to tackle hate.
Thank you. Yes, I met some mini police in an Edlington school relatively recently. Yeah, thank you. I think that's everything I wanted to ask you about. Well, not everything, but it's as much as we can do, I think, in the time. But is there anything, Ian, that you wanted to point to?
I suppose, Commissioner, one other element that I was it's probably worth just asking you to note, if you can, is that while our demands around missing and the vulnerability around that have shown a reduction in the last quarter, we've still increased our response to that, and only this week We've tripled the resource that we've put into missing from home because we understand the vulnerability that can arise from that. And we want to strengthen the links that we have with the partnership to break that cycle of missing people. So we've commenced that this week. We've got sort of a sergeant-led team that gives us coverage sort of on days, afternoons and weekends to support our response function. I think that's really important for us because it helps us deal with missing from home more effectively. And I think we're already dealing with it pretty well. But we think there's bigger gains that we can make. But it will also remove some of that, some of those inquiries from our response functions. And I do think there's interdependency between missing from home and dealing with incidents that come in through the force control room means that if we can ring fence that missing from home inquiry elsewhere, we will have more opportunities to respond to incidents as they arise, which I know we talked about at the start of these.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you very much. Okay. Everybody happy? Thank you very much, Ian. I don't know whether you want to stay or go to Doncaster. Oh, okay, right. That was item on the agenda 11, so we're still under force performance number 12, which is the police and crime plan priority of treating people fairly. This is page...
Sorry, I wonder if it'd be better to take the LRF paper first so Lydia can get away if she wanted to.
Oh, do you want to escape?
I'm happy
Dilemma, someone's got...
Just get up and go.
They do, we're always told how busy officers are, so we try and get them off as quickly as possible.
I'm prepared if you want to go now, Commissioner, but obviously no choice.
Well, we'll carry on with the agenda then if you're happy.
Sorry, Commissioner.
No, that's fine. if you're happy with that. Right, 55 to 72 is are the pages in the pack. And again, I'll do the same. I'll just ask some questions. It's Tim, this is going to be you. So if I take you to page 57, 3.9, there's a reference there to special constables and the higher number from ethnic minorities. And I wonder whether we had any clue as to why that should be among specials rather than the regular police force. And,
difficult, you talk small numbers. You are talking relatively small numbers. It doesn't.
But it makes a big difference too.
In terms of percentage figure.
I mean, it's national special constabulary that numbers from minority backgrounds are more representative than regular numbers. And Craig Batham, who will be taking over as the chief for the special constabulary later on this month, has been given a specific task around representation, engagement and support of the positive action work stream. As you know, Shaq's going out and speaking to a lot of different community groups, and I've suggested to Craig that some of that activity is supported by members of the Special Constabulary who also seek to look for it as a recruitment opportunity as well. Not only do we know that special constables play a really valuable part in our policing offer, but it is a career pathway for people as well to join policing.
Yes, it seemed, partly that as a way into the ring, but also whether there was anything we could learn about why they were willing to join the special, but we seem to struggle a bit with the more regular officers. Okay. So, page 58, at the other end of the scale, not people joining but people leaving. This is page 58, 3.22, leavers process. Exit interviews. Police officer leavers have disproportionately reported line management as a reason for leaving. That's disappointing.
Concerning.
Concerning, yes.
Concerning. And I think, what this is one of the reasons why we have invested so much in the past year in leadership training, so delivery of Sergeant's Technical Skills course and delivery of the Leadership Academy, a first line leader programme. That's shortly to be supplemented by an Inspector's Technical Skills course and a second line leader programme. We're also developing our own accelerated promotion course within the force to identify people at a young stage of the service and make sure that they get the exposure, training and in particular leadership training to be able to take on leadership roles at an earlier stage of the service. it is a fact that much of the training for frontline sergeants, in particular sergeants, but frontline staff across the board, disappeared during the years of austerity. When I was promoted to sergeant, I went on a 3-week training course to learn how to be a sergeant. I think, and it's not unique to South Yorkshire Police, because I've seen this in other police forces that I've worked in. We got to a period where you learned how to supervise by peer observation. So if your supervisor wasn't that good, that's what you learned as the standard, and we've invested an awful lot of time and effort over the past 18 months to remedy that. And that's really important, because we've recruited, as you know, we will have recruited 1,500 police officers within a 3-year period, and that will mean that 40% of the operational workforce has got less than 3 years service. So we will need the line managers of the future to be taking on those roles at a relatively young level of service. So it is a concern, but that's our response to it.
Well, it's good it's identified, isn't it? Because if you don't know, then you're in the dark, but you've identified it and can hopefully deal with it.
Just to add to what the Deputy said, I think the fact that we are proactively working on the exit interviews, I mean, this is only a proportion of people that choose to take an exit interview. But I think the fact that we now have a much richer amount of information allows us to target things in a more proactive way, whether that be around, as the Deputy mentioned, around that kind of leadership training, etc. in the academy, or whether that's some other processes that we might need to change within the organisation, working really closely with colleagues in pod to make sure that whatever the information shows us that we can actively work upon it.
But we recognise the seriousness of it, because we're recruiting lots of people, but retention has got to be a real issue for us moving forward. And we know that pay has been pegged back. We know there's a cost of living crisis, and we know that if people aren't happy at work, they will leave. It is a factor. It's a simple fact. So hence the focus on the new values, the culture programme, the leadership training, all designed to make sure that we maximise the retention of that workforce and give our we've got some brilliant people joining us, making sure that we provide the opportunities and the development opportunities for them to be able to further their careers and flourish within South Yorkshire Police.
Thank you. On page 60, 3.36, you talk about the organisational culture, and I know that we're working through with the independent ethics panel to develop, some understanding of the culture of the force, and hopefully that will be helpful to you. And again, Michael is here. I don't know whether you want to comment on that at all, Michael.
Well, that's work ongoing, but if I can just pick up on the previous item in the investment in training. When we conducted our original inquiries around about 2017, which involved an extensive interview programme with sergeants on a one-to-one basis, and then with inspectors, the thing they said was most difficult was actually managing their own personnel when things were difficult. They were confident dealing with horrendous professional situations, but when it came to dealing with a colleague who maybe was performing at the margins or where there were concerns, those were the sorts of situations that they found most challenging and tended to duck or refer to the next level up. So to hear that that is now a focus in terms of strengthening leadership and the understanding of leadership at all levels, I think is really encouraging, and it's just a little marker of progress from where we were. So I hope that the continuing work of the ethics panel in relation to the culture of the organisation throws up opportunities to build in that, and that's just an example of how things have changed over time.
Okay, thank you. Page 63, para towards the bottom, 3.49, staff sickness absence rates, and there's a chart. Unfortunately, it stops in June, and we then have the summer surge. and I just wondered if what happens next, so to speak.
You know, Commissioner, I haven't had a report on sickness
Okay,
recently. I
does
don't know
anybody
if
know?
anyone, looking at my colleagues, if anyone else has got any data, we'd have to come back to you with any latest data. I've certainly not been highlighted to me. And I'll look at sort of district colleagues, if you've seen it acutely increase locally.
District actually, we feel like we do reasonably well. You always have people that have symptoms of sick. We have in our district we have a number of people who are long term because of some really unfortunate illnesses, and quite rightly should not be at work. But actually, in terms of the sort of short term sickness, we're really not faring too badly.
We continue to monitor the COVID situation really closely. I mean, there's been a little bit of an uptick in the last week or two, but nothing that's, COVID has never really caused us, because even at the height,
I have heard of
see Michelle touching
nothing like tempting fate. No,
but generally our sickness levels have been quite good.
I've heard other PCCs from around the country talking about an exhausted workforce from time to time. Over this last 2 years, it seems as if we've been, hit with one thing after another.
I think that's
very fair
comment. Not only have we had the challenges of the pandemic and some colleagues being absent from the workplace and having to work in different ways, the COVID brought in new legislation that had to be learnt, understood, enacted. And then as restrictions lifted, the world went back to normal, and there wasn't really an opportunity for our staff to have a holiday in Sharm el Sheikh or anywhere else. And sort of demand came back with a bang, really. So it does feel like it's been busy, and actually the intake of new officers and the training and the tutoring has just added, I suppose, to a sense of we are permanently busy. So I think people do feel a bit
when you're
tired.
tutoring an officer, and it's an anecdotal rule of thumb, but if you've got a tutor and a student officer, so you've got 2 officers, it takes twice as long to do half the work, because you're teaching someone step by step.
I can't work it out. Twice as long to half. Yes. Yeah.
Which, if you've got that and you've got it, the volume of student officers that we have going through the force, and then you've got that with a moderate increase in demand that we've seen as we've emerged from COVID, that brings our officers are really busy, and they're working extremely hard, and they put themselves out day after day after day for the public, and it does take its toll. So I think that our sickness figures, given that context, are very good at the moment.
I actually think the numbers of fully operational competent people who've gone through all the training and tutoring and are now filtering into posts, our colleagues will start to feel some respite, because you'll know that during the summer we obviously had to enact summer surge to make sure that we were unable to meet demand. That meant that we compelled officers to work additional hours. We didn't have to do that as much as we did the previous year, but we still had to do it for half of people's shifts. Half of people's relevant kind of weekend shifts. So people have worked really hard, and actually not only will the public see the benefit of new people coming through, but actually the colleagues will as well.
And some of those shifts could be quite long.
Yeah, 12 hours.
Yeah.
12 hours is a long time.
It is long.
When you're doing this sort of work.
Right, page 65, 3.60. The resource allocation formula. The Mayor of Doncaster gets me every so often and says, whatever the formula is, it's wrong, because Doncaster doesn't do very well. But so you are having a look at it, but I don't know whether there's anything to say around that as to why you need to do it if it was right.
Well, I think the previous formula wasn't necessarily a formula, it was more an assessment using professional judgment, and what the business changed.
That's what the Mayor said, but you all said no, there's a formula.
Well, there is a formula, but actually when you look at the science that sits behind the formula, it's more anecdotal and professional judgment rather than robust scientific methodology. So the business change team are looking at things around quantity of incidents, the type and nature of those incidents, what are the societal demographics and how might that influence demand, and also some specific locations. For example, we know the area around the race course and the St Leger period is our fourth high demand, high challenge area. So all of that more scientifically based information is being taken into account to consider what does the most appropriate allocation of force resources look like.
what I would, again, and you'd expect me to say this, Commissioner, is people's perceptions are always driven by what they see on the street in yellow coats.
Yeah.
And policing is far more complex, and we need, if you were to ask me where the acute level of demand at the moment is across the force, response policing is one which we've talked about, but PVP and having enough detectives to investigate the most serious of crime against the most vulnerable people is an area where we could put dozens more resources tomorrow if we had them.
Yeah.
And that doesn't get seen by the public or the politicians, but remains really, really important. And that's where, to a degree, our professional judgment is very valid, because we've been around policing for an awful long time, and we're charged with spreading that resource to meet all those demands across the force.
It's just that when I meet the Mayor of Doncaster, I need a bit of body armour. Well, you may have to do the body armour.
Resource management is a dark art of professional judgment and some of the demand data. Some bits like response, really easy to do some metrics around, but that does have to be balanced off some of the more complex, multi-layered areas, and there are some things which will never be seen by the public. Online.
Yes, good. Right, thank you. Page 67, this is 3.74. There's a little chart, little diagram there. What got me going? Oh yes, towards the bottom of right on the bottom line there, ASB, this reduction in ASB, that does seem extraordinary.
Yeah, and it's something that we are looking at. It is disappointing to see that, given that we've invested so much in neighbourhood policing. So we do need to look at it and try and understand what is driving that at the moment.
There's a pilot scheme in Rotherham, isn't there? What? Does anybody know about that? No? No, didn't ring any bells. Okay, I got that wrong. Right, thank you very much. So we go to page 70. And this is at the top of the page. Well, no, it's the whole of the page, really. It's about violence against women and girls. I just wonder, having done a lot of work around this now, whether you feel there are we missing any groups in this? I'm thinking particularly elderly women. Are they a missing group from all the work that we're doing and all the people we're identifying?
I think in terms of the independent advisory group, we are, certainly Nat is fairly content with the distribution of women within there, and that we've got women representing sort of different religious groups, different backgrounds. I think the age one is a particularly interesting question, and I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I'll ask Nat and come back to you on that one. Because it was an issue that came up when we rolled out the domestic abuse matters training. And some of the scenario base there scenario base, it was a real life example, not based locally, but the victim and offender were both in their 70s, and it actually caused some questioning through our force performance day at the time about actually what's our breakdown of ages in relation to some of our offending categories. So it is something that needs to be included if it isn't already. It hasn't been flagged as a gap. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a gap to check.
It's just something I notice when I go to community groups in particular, which tend to be older people, and I think a couple of years, perhaps a bit more ago, you couldn't even got a conversation going around this. They would affect not to know what you're talking about, whereas now they talk about it. So, okay. On page 71. Return to stop and search towards the bottom of page 3.101. The external stop and search scrutiny panel. You say there that you'd like more BAME members.
Yeah.
I just wonder whether there was any merit in the panel meeting where, not calling BAME members into your panel meetings, but taking the panel meetings to where BAME people are, i.e.
Very possibly. Sue's on with that. I mean, this has moved on a little bit since this report was done, in so much as we've had those meetings as part of the race action plan down at Sadaka, where we got a load of people that were quite happy to get involved in this sort of work. So Sue John was got that to take forward in terms of improving the diversity of those panels. I mean, in terms of the broader issue around stop and search at the moment, we touched on hit rates for stop and search, which I think are pretty good across the force. the big challenge for us at the moment, and it's been highlighted in the work we've done, is about use of body-worn video. We were coming out about 77% were body-worn videos used. That's not good enough and needs to improve. Some of the challenges we've got at the moment is the administration of stop and search forms and matching up body-worn video. So it might be higher than that, but we're struggling with the system to identify that. But there's definitely a gap. So we're working on that through training, and also we are awaiting a change to the stop and search form that actually allows us to record on the form where the body-worn video has been used. So that gives a far more accurate picture of what that utilisation is, and it will also enable more effective supervision, because supervisors will be able to see straight away where the body-worn video has been used and actively question the circumstances where it's not. So I do anticipate that will resolve itself all the time.
Yes, it was. I don't know how feasible it would be to do it, but whether, in order to catch some of the younger people, whether you did something in a school or a community, something like that, rather than them coming. That was what I had in mind.
Okay.
The technology may just be too much to bear. Okay. I think that's everything I wanted to ask on that, Tim, unless you have...
No, there's nothing further.
Okay, so we move on then to... Lydia. You're very patient. This is 73 to 88. I don't think I wanted to ask any great questions. I just wondered whether you wanted to say something around this. And,
I mean, the only thing I would say, Commissioner, is that we really do have an effective LRF here in South Yorkshire. We see the values of working in partnership, with our blue light colleagues, the local authorities at that strategic level, to try and protect the public collectively. We're doing lots of initiatives around that. You came to the event, obviously, earlier this week around Operation Adonis, which is some of our preparedness for a major incident within the county. And whilst it was very much led by the police, all the local authorities, all the blue light partners have been involved in some of that preparation, and that will be our foundation for further exercising through the strategic group and the tactical coordinating groups thereafter, and it will form an exercise regime moving forward for the rest of the year. So there is quite a lot of work that we're trying to do around the sporting, the return to events, as well through the partnership through the LRF, and in our protect duty around the PALs, the publicly accessible locations, just looking at improving collectively the public safety here in South Yorkshire.
That event you referred to, astonishing amount of organisation and preparation of that.
True credit and testament to the staff. It really was outstanding work.
So it went well from that point of view, from an organisational point.
Yeah.
And you must have learnt a lot of different things during the course of the day.
Yeah, clearly each partner that was there had different learning objectives that they wanted to achieve and satisfy. We're now doing a structured debrief to capture that, to then feed it in, and I know Mr Forber is really passionate about making sure, definitely on the back of the Manchester Arena, that we capture that, and we are collectively in a really good and strong position should we, touch wood, hopefully not have an event of such magnitude and nature here in South Yorkshire. But the debriefing has already commenced. The sort of learning practices is that we complete that within a 28-day period. So the team have gone from the preparedness now to collecting that evidence base so we can drive that necessary change.
And I think somebody, it might have been yourself, Tim, was saying that nothing like this has been done elsewhere.
Certainly the concept of that exercise and the way that it unfolded hasn't been tested anywhere else, because certainly the armed response vehicles operating in that sort of environment is quite new.
I'm surprised by that, or perhaps I shouldn't be, but I mean, someone's got to do it somewhere, but given...
I think my observations of working with the LRF here, which are, certainly Dave Hartley's done it a lot more than I have, but in terms of thinking about the complexities of the sort of incidents we might have to manage, they are very much on the front foot, and Monday was an example of that. But by the same token, for many of the things, so my main experience was flooding when we had the floods at Doncaster in 2019. The resilience plans that are in place around those are constantly reviewed and robust, and the mechanisms in place to be able to spring into action when we do have an adverse event are really, really good, and certainly the support that the LRF provided to me as Gold Commander throughout that period was exemplary and as good as I've seen anywhere else where I've worked in different forces around the country.
I imagine there are a lot of desktop type exercises done those.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is for real.
We've relied on those obviously during COVID to an extent, and this was our first sort of real opportunity to do an event of that size and magnitude, and we are really developing on it moving forward. And I just echo what Mr. Forber has said there. We are really quite, pioneering as an LRF. And the support that we get, we host the LRF Secretariat, and she really does put us on the sort of front foot there nationally. We met through the business management group, and the strategic group meets later this week. We are already testing our winter preparedness plans, so we really are, and we're developing into our LRF structure much more than other regions, which is really pleasing to see.
Yes, I was sorry I had to leave partway through. You certainly didn't lay on the weather. It was.
It wasn't raining though.
It wasn't raining,
It was
but
cold.
by gummy, it was blowing at one point. It was crazy. And I was intrigued by the drones inside the arena, the use of drones, which had never crossed my mind before, that they'd be using an internal setting.
We've got that capability for internal premises, in houses. We really are investing in our drone programme because we can do much more with it around that crime prevention, and if we can put a drone in there rather than an officer, it's much safer for them as well. We protect our staff.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Sorry
Thank you, Commissioner.
we kept you a long time for it.
It's been very interesting, so thank you.
You're very kind. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Again, you're very welcome to stay or to go, whatever you want to do.
I'll stay if that's okay.
Of course. That was item 13. We're now on to the Chief Executive reporting, treating people fairly, equality, diversity and inclusion. Michelle.
Yes, Commissioner. So you probably said at the top of the meeting that this is an unusual meeting because the September one was cancelled for Her Majesty's funeral, and so this report would have been more timely in terms of the Race Equality Commission report launch being in September. We took the opportunity to update it so that it felt fresher coming to the October meeting, hence it was a late report. So apologies to members that it was later than the main pack. It seeks to set out what the OPCC and yourself are doing, as well as the IEP, in relation to this EDI area, equality, diversity and inclusion generally, and then sort of positions the Race Equality Commission report within that landscape. It seeks to complement Sheffield's report, but also the fairness report that Tim has just gone through in relation to race disproportionality, etc. So we do seek to complement that. The report sets out your responsibilities, Commissioner, around EDI, particularly in the appendix. So part of what you look at is holding the force to account for its approaches to EDI. And then the work of the ethics panel as well helps that assurance, as well as obviously setting strategic direction for the force. We started work before the Race Equality Commission came along, obviously on the back of the George Floyd murder, and you held a series of engagement events with members of the black community in Sheffield. From that dialogue, we learned various things, including the fact that black communities asked questions and were provided quite candidly with data that we got on disproportionality, and their focus ended by the end of the dialogue towards the wider criminal justice system and disproportionality there. So locally, I don't think the black community have an issue with South Yorkshire Police per se from the dialogue that we had, but nevertheless efforts are going on in South Yorkshire Police and in our office to understand disproportionality and seek to address it. The report I won't go into the work that the office is doing. Safe to say we are trying to keep momentum and improve pace in relation to what we've addressed are the gaps and weaknesses in our approaches. So the Sheffield Race Equality Commission report then at 5.1 had a number of recommendations and actions aimed at anchor institutions, of which you are not one, but South Yorkshire Police is. Commissioner, you'll recall being at the launch event in June and saying something in relation to welcoming it and what you saw as the next steps. One of the recommendations talks about a legacy board set up by Sheffield City Council, who commissioned the report in the first place, to take forward those recommendations and findings with the anchor institutions. We're yet to learn how that's going to be constituted or what those next steps look like, but we stand ready to support that, as do South Yorkshire Police, and we've made that very, very public. So we await that, but that hasn't stopped us making progress with the various things. I reference at 5.9 what's already been said around the police race action plan in particular, but all sorts of activity going on in South Yorkshire Police to improve our position. So we're not waiting for the legacy board, we're getting on with activity that we see is needed, as are South Yorkshire Police, and we will have budgetary discussions with the Chief Constable and our office in relation to investment in this area so that we can see those recommendations through. There is set out in the appendices, Michael, the focus of the IEP in supporting the Commissioner in this area, so I don't know whether, having read the report, you want to add anything?
Very little, other than to say that we were actually on with the issues that are raised in the Sheffield Race Equality report long before the Commissioners reported. So the issue of recruitment and everything, and retention and promotion, if you like, the internal life not only of the police force but its police staff, is something we've been addressing and believe some progress has been made. The issue of disproportionality runs through really all our work, and particularly in relation to stop and search. It's been an area where we have, together with the office, spent a great deal of time looking at the statistics. We've been frustrated by the fact that we had to rely on the 2011 census and are waiting for the second release of the 2021 census to at least get a sharper position on that. The external scrutiny panel, which was reconstituted after the height of the COVID emergency, does include some members from the ethnic minority communities, but insufficient in the view of Chief Inspector Gilmore and ourselves. I recently provided Chief Inspector Gilmore with a couple of contact details of women who lead within the Asian communities in Sheffield as potential contacts, and I guess that's been followed up. So I think there's a high level of awareness. The biggest challenge, in a way, is to draw in some of the people making observations about the shortcomings into being part of the solution in terms of improving practice. So I think I'll probably leave it there. Hopefully, Commissioner, you feel well briefed by us in terms of the work that we're trying to do.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Michelle?
Thank you.
Okay. Were the police, were you formally interviewed by that Race Equality Commission, or?
Shelley attended, yeah. Shelley.
Oh, Shelley did, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Sheffield based.
It's Sheffield, yes, of course. Okay, thank you. Any other observations on that? Or okay, thank you very much. Shall we go to 15 then? Strategic planning update, Michelle, 89 to 94.
Thank you, Commissioner. So this is in the main pack, and again was due to the September meeting, and so the appendix, which sets out a timetable, was a timetable that was agreed a couple of months back in principle, and then has been firmed up since. The first part of the report, Commissioner, sets out your statutory responsibilities for the public in relation to set in the police and crime plan, which you're required to do on entering your office after the election, and then revisiting it each year to make sure it's fresh and reflects the priorities it needs to. And then you holding the purse strings for South Yorkshire Policing and Crime budget, and setting the council tax precept. So we have an annual process, which, as I say, is captured in the timetable in the appendix, and we follow that with force colleagues, partners and the public in terms of information inputs into your decision making around the priorities for South Yorkshire and the budget setting and council tax precept proposal, which you take to the Police and Crime Panel each February. So you have a planning and efficiency group, which meets, that's now in 2 parts, following the learning exercise we did after last year's process. So we have an OPCC PEG, where we discuss our own budgets, including partnerships and commissioning, based on assessments of need that we conduct for you for that portion of the budget. And in terms of the Chief Constable's budget, we have a PEG with the force, where we ask for certain products to inform the main part, the bulk of the budget that goes to the Chief Constable and the force. That decision making, as it starts to take you through from 4.3 onwards, is based on the force's assessment of what policing needs are in South Yorkshire. So the demand currently and in the future, what the public are telling South Yorkshire about its service, etc., etc. They come with that assessment of need to present to you, that plus the policing operating model that they need to meet that demand going forwards over the coming years in the medium term in particular, and a costed model at that, so that you know the budget that's required. In that process, there is a list of savings proposals to meet the budget shortfall that arises from that assessment, and growth proposals where the force has said, to meet this policing need in the future, this is the investment we need. We know, because of the cost of living crisis and the economy, and all the other factors that the public will be well aware of, that this year is going to be extremely challenging in relation to the budget. And we received the first draft of a priority survey yesterday from your communications and engagement lead, which will go to the members of the public to say, these are the priorities at the moment, this is what the force needs going forward in terms of investment. Will you pay a little bit more in your council tax to fund that going forward, because we think the government won't meet all the needs that the Chief Constable has assessed in effect. So we're preparing to go to the public in relation to that consultation to also inform your budget setting. And I wanted to trail that in detail because it will, one, save me having to repeat that again in future meetings as we go through the cycle, but two, I think it's important to trail with the force, with members of the public and partners, the difficulties that we're going to have this year in balancing the books. I think that's all I needed to pick out from
Thank you. Yes, on that, I think there are 2 key dates. One is October the 31st, and I think lots of people are waiting for some announcement around that will stabilise things nationally and internationally for us, because it will have an impact if they can't do that on us. And then the other one is early December, when we get the grant settlement announced, and the government have said that public spending will not be cut, but that's not quite the same as saying it will go up in line with inflation. So I'm quite nervous about that, and I think, which in effect will be a cut. So I'm quite nervous around that. I think we're looking at flat cash and, I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's not an announcement in the next couple of days, to be quite honest, because of the movement that's going on and the leaks that are going to the press. And what the Prime Minister said was that public expenditure would be cut, which is different to what other people are interpreting it as.
Yeah, and also in terms of those departments that are protected and those that are not protected, we're clearly not defence and we're not the NHS. You can see, and if the idea is that the cost of policing should be shifted even more towards council taxpayers, which has been a direction of travel, then I think we're in really difficult territory this year, because people are really struggling everywhere, but particularly here in South Yorkshire. So it's not a very happy place that we're in at the moment, and as they say, things can only get worse. No, we must cheer ourselves up as best we can, which is what we were doing last night. We call it the San Lorenzo intervention. We'll tell you about that sometime. Okay, thank you very much. That was strategic planning update. 16 PCC decisions.
Yeah, Commissioner, not much to highlight here. 4.2.3, the NLED system you've approved external funding for, which will replace the Police National Computer. The rest of the decisions relate to support for sexual offences, basically services, activity, programmes that you've funded to support sexual offending, sexual assaults, sex offenders. Unless there's any other questions, Commissioner, that's all I wanted to know.
Okay, any questions or comments? Right, thank you. So we're on to any other business. Is there any other? There shouldn't be any other business. You should have told us. But
may I just mention the work programme, Commissioner, first of all? It's been circulated.
Sorry, did I miss that out?
It's okay.
Work programme 17.
Because the September meeting was cancelled, we're taking 2 force performance reports next time to catch up. So it will be protecting vulnerable people and tackling crime and ASB, which we've agreed with the force, plus the Rotherham district focus. Tim, I may not have got this message to you as yet, but the CSC update, we're moving into the new year because you've got appeal or a standalone inspection in relation to CSE. So we think it'll be a fresher report once that's sort of taken effect. But we only had the last report March, I think. So we'll move that forwards to clear some space on the agenda next time. If that's okay.
Anything else, anyone? Are any of you there tonight?
I am.
Lindsay, you're there. Oh, I'll see you there then. Okay, good. I think that's everything, everyone. Thank you very much indeed. There was a lot to get through and we've done it in a reasonable time. So thank you.